Welcome to the Talkin VAWLS Network. My name is Boogie Bentley. I want to talk about the future of the SEC. What's it going to look like? You know, the news came out back in 2021 that Texas and Oklahoma would be transitioning to the Southeastern Conference. Sounds like that's going to be around the year 2025. So what does the future of the SEC look like? I saw this on Twitter from Big Game Boomer showing a college football pod system coming soon. And if you look at pod number 2, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt, sign me up for that. But let's talk about what a pod system will look like in the SEC. Before we get going, as always, do me a favor, smash that thumbs up just below the video. It's quick, it's free, it's easy, helps the channel. Also, if you're new to the Talkin VAWLS Network, welcome. We're not experts, we're not insiders, we are fans just like you. So if you enjoy the content, make sure you subscribe, click that bell for notifications. You won't miss out when we go live or when we drop a video. Let's go ahead and take a look at this article. This is from 24/7 Sports, written by Kirk McNair. What if the SEC does away with divisions? This is a little long, but I want to run through it because there's some good points here. It talks about back in the early 1990s, Southeastern Conference Commissioner Roy Kramer picked up on something. The NCAA had a rule designed for conferences below the level of what now are known as Power 5 conferences. The rule allowed a conference with 12 or more football teams to divide in divisions and have the division winners play a conference championship game. If it had to be done, it went unnoticed by most. It goes on to say here, but the SEC had gone out of its traditional footprint, added Arkansas and South Carolina in 1992. The SEC, which had begun with 13 teams in 1933, dropped Swanee soon after and lost Georgia Tech and Tulane in the 60s, went from 10 teams to 12 and divided into East and West divisions. And that's something, you know, that's part of this. What happens if the SEC goes into a pod system? Are you going to lose the SEC championship game? I don't think so. Doesn't sound like it. Listening to Josh Pate talk about this a couple of weeks ago or last week sometime, talked about no longer having divisions but still having a conference championship game. You would just take the top 2 teams out of all 4 pods. And look, I don't want to lose the SEC championship game. I will be glad to see that stick around. I think that adds a little something extra to the SEC. Look, when you look at national champions, the SEC has won the national championship 12 out of the last 16 seasons. 12 out of the last 16. And part of that excitement is that SEC championship game early Saturday in December, watching the 2 best teams in the SEC go head-to-head. And even though we've seen, you know, in recent times, Georgia and Alabama, for example, they may play in the regular season, they may play in the SEC championship game, and they may turn around and play again in the national championship. But that is because the SEC is the premier conference in all of college football. I think we would all agree on that. The article here talks about Alabama under Gene Stallings going undefeated and winning the West, while Steve Spurrier's Florida team was the Eastern champions, and they played in the inaugural SEC championship game. It says there was much hand-wringing that the SEC championship game could and eventually would knock an SEC team out of the national championship contention. As it turned out, Bama's defense made everything perfect. Antonio Langham returned a late Florida pass for a touchdown, yada, yada, yada. The SEC championship game was off to a good start. What do you guys think about that? Do you think the SEC championship game makes it more difficult for an SEC team to get into the national championship? See, I don't agree with that, because again, when you look at the number of times you've had an SEC team in the national championship over the last 20 years, I think you were just confirming and getting the best team out of the SEC. Now, you settle it on the field of play. It's hard to argue. Now, anybody can beat anybody on any given day. When you take 2 teams like an Alabama and a Georgia and you put them together, who deserves to be in the national championship game? If one team wins during the regular season, one team wins the SEC championship game, who deserves to move on to that national championship? But the article goes on to say here, some believe conference championship games may be headed for extinction. I disagree. I like them. Says that seems unlikely as long as television networks are paying big bucks to call the shots. Divisions, however, are no longer necessary for a conference to have a title game. It can set its own criteria. The Big 12 of 10 teams has a round-robin schedule, every team playing every other team, and the top two playing the conference championship game. Word was out from the ACC recently that it may go to a rotating schedule and eliminate divisions prior to 2023. This seems to involve two connected but different discussions: to have divisions and to continue to have championship games. Second issue may be tied to college football playoff expansion. And again, we just talked about that recently. That's been axed. That's been pushed off to the future. There's no expansion at this point. It says last year, both national championship finalists, champion Georgia and Alabama, played 15 games, including the SEC championship game won by the Tide. Then that's, you start adding, people talking about a 16-team playoff. You're adding a lot of games to the schedule when you're talking about the physical, violent game of football. So I don't know that they would expand that college football playoff outside of 8 teams, absolute max. But it goes on to say, as the issue of divisions, that's a planned topic of conversation at this year's SEC spring meeting, which ordinarily is nothing more than a nice vacation for conference staff and college football, basketball, and administrative heads. Oh, and that nice $50 million paycheck for each conference member. Everything comes back to money. Don't forget it. It says SEC teams play 8 league games in the current structure, 6 against the other members of its division, 1 permanent opponent, the division, and 1 other division on a rotating basis. One reason this formula has been criticized is players in a 4-year career may never play a game against 1 or more conference members and certainly not play a game in every SEC stadium. Another is playing 8 games leaves room for non-conference, yada, yada, yada. Let's go back and look at the pod system, because that's what I want to talk about, because I think that is the future of the SEC. So when we pull the pods back up here on the screen, and just looking at the SEC, and I think the way the Big Game Boomer Twitter account, that's a 24/7 sports account, I think the way they're throwing this out here is by location, area. You can see Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee, Vanderbilt all lumped up together. You go a little bit more south, you've got Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, and Florida. And look, when you look at the way this is laid out, the way that Big Boomer has the pods laid out, it's absolutely brutal. That pod 1 is absolutely brutal, but how would you lay this out? How would you lay out 4 pods consisting of 4 teams each? Because, things shift season to season. Tennessee's down, Tennessee's up. Alabama obviously has been dominant recently. Florida has been up. Now it seems they're trending down over the last several years, and people can argue, they can disagree. It's the reality. Tennessee should have beat Florida way more often than they have over the last 10 years. It's just the reality of the situation. Florida has been down, and teams, they cycle up, they cycle down. It's the world of college football. So how would you lay these out? Would you lay the 4 pods out by location? Would you lay them out by rivals? And how would you set up the schedule? Well, one way you could take a look at doing the schedule would be, first, you play everybody in your pod. So Tennessee would play South Carolina, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt, and then you would add another pod every season. So maybe pod 2 plays pod 3 in 2025. Then you add 1 regular rivalry game that's always on the schedule. So for Tennessee, that would be Alabama. I know some people disagree. Some people don't want that. And again, when you go to these 4 pods, when you're rotating like that, look how few times in this circumstances, the way it's laid out, that Tennessee would play a Georgia or Tennessee would play a Florida. But that's what happens when you expand and you've got 16 teams in the Southeastern Conference. So I don't know what the answer is. What do you guys think in the comments? How would you lay out the 4 pods, and then how would you base the scheduling? Would you keep it at 8 conference games? And again, that would be playing one pod, your pod, and then add another, and then add 1 rotate your rival game that you play every year. Or would you bump it up and let's play 10 conference games? There's several different ways you can do it. You could do away with divisions and just have 1 solid conference full of 16 teams. Again, I don't know how you would set up the schedule for that, but the SEC conference is changing. It is changing, and it's coming soon, 2025, maybe sooner. But hit that comment section. Let me know your thoughts. I know that was a lot of information, throwing it out there from the article, but just wanted to pop out a video today, get your thoughts on the future of the SEC. If you have not done so yet, please smash that thumbs up on the way out the door. Also, go check out the official merchandise of the Talkin VAWLS Network. Go to bonfire.com/store/Talkin VAWLS. Any and all support greatly appreciated. Got the new merchandise coming in, so make sure you go check it out. Get in where you fit in. Again, that's bonfire.com/store/Talkin VAWLS. That's going to do it for this one. This is the Talkin VAWLS Network. My name is Boogie Bentley. Go Big Orange.